Can a woman above 30 actually be happy being single? That's the question that we're going to answer tonight. You don't actually love them.
So now you're what we're doing, helicopter parenting.
But we can even get more used to carrying the emotional bag.
Going from what I like to call healing to wholeness.
But we're not created as beings to be alone.
You like that picture every time, don't you?
And the music.
Welcome to Live, Love, and Marry Wisely, where our mission is in our name. Proverbs 4:7 says, wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom. But with all thy getting, get understanding. And tonight, we want to have an understanding about something from a different perspective. Can a woman who's over 30 actually be happy being single? And I want to dive right into this conversation, Onita, but I will ask, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's always great to be here on Tuesday nights. I've sent the link out to everybody I know, at least for the most part. But so hopefully they're tuning in and they're going to be in our comments. But I'm excited to just share this time with you, and also looking forward to hearing from our guests. So I'm good.
Good. I am doing well, and I'm going to just tell the audience we are not going to do an update today because I want to get into this conversation because number one, I absolutely adore this woman who is joining us. She is just fantastic. Hard to describe her, but when I talk to her a lot of times, I'm just like, man, she's just so insightful. Like she thinks things through in a way that is refreshing. And so I'm excited to have her on here to have this particular conversation. But before we do that, I want to play a video that relates to this conversation. So watch with me as we do this. This is Kevin on stage.
Saw this on the internet. This woman said there's no single woman above 30 who is happy being single. No matter how you pretend to be, deep down, you want a man. Now, I can only speak for the single homegirls that I know, but a lot of them are not pretending. They are legitimately happy, content, fulfilled in their singleness. Deep down, they want to go to Turks and Caicos. Deep down, they're plotting on Bora Bora. They want to go to the Maldives. They're going to be in Vegas or Miami. They be linking up, y'all. They be planning trips, and it makes it out of the group chat, and they be doing TikToks. They be on boats. They be twerking. They be having the time of their life. A lot of them have peace. They wanted a man before, or they done been through some stuff with men. They be like, you know what? If it comes, it comes. If it don't, it don't. Okay? They be like, if a man comes and make my life better, fine. But if he gonna come mess with my whole situation, I got my whole routine. I go to work, I come home, I have dinner, I soak my tub, I read my book, I watch my program, whatever. My grandma is over 30. She ain't had no man in 30, 40 years. She is happy. All she want to go to is the council and the convention, and she want to go to Ireland one time. Trust me, she ain't worried about no man like that. I'm trying to tell you, it'd be hard to believe, but people be happy. They don't be pretending. They be legitimately like, I'm good, really good. But ladies, if you're single and above 30, let me hear from you. Are you deep down really wanting a man? Are you really happy?
Listen, you ain't lying. I've heard from a lot of single women, especially if they're over 30.
Well, we have a woman who's over 30, and she hadn't seen that video, at least not from me. And so we're going to bring her on and ask her the question herself. Welcome to the stage, Nicole Harris, my friend, my buddy, my SDA homegirl. Hey, Nicole.
Hey, how you doing?
I am doing well, thank you. How are you?
Good. I really, really enjoyed that video. That was my first time seeing it.
I'm glad that was your first time seeing it. So we are so happy to have you here. Yes. I'm just going to ask you to just give us, your elevator speech about who you are.
Sure. So I am Nicole. I'm a learning professional. So I design training, curriculum, all of that jazz. And kind of the topic tonight was just really interesting to me because it's kind of just how I live. And I don't really realize that it's weird or different to people until people ask me the question. And so I thought it was great to be here because maybe could shed some light, and also for people that are like me, to let them know they're not alone.
Yeah. Yes. So she, we don't have time to go into her being a learning professional.
Yes.
But that's like a whole thing that I am just like so loving. Like I've seen just a little bit of her work. Like she designs training, but like the digital aspect, the technological aspect, and it is like blowing my mind and fantastic. She's awesome. But welcome to those who are here with us live. We hope that you'll be in the chat asking questions and just making comments. We want to hear from you. But I'm glad that you hadn't seen that video because it's the perfect segue. And I just want to, it's Sherry-Lynn. I want to ask you first to give a brief overview of your singleness journey.
Yeah. So, I think when people hear that you're content single, they think, and for some people it's true, but they think you've never been interested, you're totally shut down. And I was a typical, teen. I liked guys. I dated in my late teens, early 20s. Like I did all of the normal stuff. I've had situations that were really nice, or we're still friends and all of that. So I'm a human being, So I'm never going to pretend that like I don't think about it, or that, I haven't had relationships that were fulfilling at the time. But in general, there were so many times where I just knew like what my future was. Like, for instance, if there was somebody who they were nice, but they weren't like focused on their future, or their relationship with God was kind of shaky, it was never worth it to me just to be with somebody, So it's one of those things where, kind of like Kevin Stage says, like if somebody came, great, but it's not something that I am like running after. And I never say that to shame anybody who is, right? Because it is a natural desire to want to desire that. But I think what also contributes to me is that I am an only child. And not only am I an only child introvert. So the idea of being alone was not something that I feared as a kid. Like my mom was with me and all that stuff, very active mom, but like I played alone. Like I literally came home and had my own like fantasy fairy world in the backyard. Like I wrote stories, to make I always entertained myself. And so some people may come from big families, or they come from these relationships and their parents, and they're like, oh, I can't understand life alone. I was watching a video actually with one of the Maury sisters, Tia, who just got a divorce. And she was saying I was a twin, then I had a 20-something year relationship. So I'm struggling to be alone right now. I think for me, it's just like being alone was a huge factor of my life that I didn't know that it was a negative. So when there was no romantic partner, I don't necessarily equate that with my life has gone down. It's my life is the same it's always been.
Yes.
I think that's a really important point, where when you said, I don't equate being alone with something as something negative.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously there are many women, as Kev on stage said, there are many women, but those aren't the women that you hear about.
Yes.
Yeah.
What we mostly hear about is, the desperation, and you got to have a man, and so depressed and can't believe I'm alone, and this constant rehashing of that feeling. And as we said, no one's shaming anyone for wanting to be in a relationship. Absolutely. And you also stated that you're not saying I don't want to be in a relationship. Exactly. You're saying I'm not pressed by that. Absolutely. I don't feel like something's missing in my life, or that I can't live. And maybe I'm putting some words in your mouth. So that I don't feel like it's a negative that I'm not in a partnership or a romantic relationship.
Absolutely.
And so many women do. Yeah. Now, obviously, if you watch this program, you know that I have publicly stated that is what I desire now. Absolutely. I don't see that as a negative, but I also have been living my life full and doing the things. I haven't stopped living, because I'm in desperation, or do I walk around lonely and desperate and depressed because I don't have that? And I think that's what we're trying to destroy, that kind of mentality and mindset in the audience that we have.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, I will say, if there's a lizard loose in my house, I want a husband so bad. I mean, I have all the feels like immediately. Like, where is he? And why can't I find anyone? Then like I have like a physical lizard catcher, then I catch it, then I'm okay. So there are moments where I'm like, Pete, man, like I need a man. I mean, it happens heavy. Like I'm singing a whole. If a lizard was here right now, we'd have to change the name of the program. I'd be like, actually, I would really like one right now. Because, yeah, but to your point, I think that's the thing, is like we don't need to shame men or women, right? But we don't need to shame for wanting it or for not wanting it or being somewhere in between. It really is emphasizing, how do you still live your life, right? Because like I said, I'm human, right? So if there are moments where I'm like, oh wow, that would be nice or whatever, at the end of the day, I still have a purpose, right? Like I work with youth in my church. I have friends that I need to check on. I have people I need to pray for. I'm an artsy person, so I have an art festival to go to. Like, it doesn't stop my life, even if I do have a moment of, that'd be nice, right? And I think that's, to Lorraine's point, is like, wherever you are on the spectrum, how do you still live your life and know that God has given you a purpose?
Yes. Yes. Hey, Nicole, I thank you again for sharing that, because I told my daughter and some of her friends, they're in college, tune in. Because right now, part of her reason for being like, she's not thinking about dating because she's in one of the toughest semesters of college in her life. So she's like, I ain't got time for it.
Yes.
But I wanted her to be able to hear too. It's not just because of time, but you can be okay, even though you're seeing everybody getting booed up and you're like, don't feel like you're less than because of that. So I'm glad you're here and share that perspective, and I hope she's tuning in. I want to ask you, because we always try to get in your business a little bit.
Sure.
What have some of your, how has some of your past experiences with dating, and maybe even with your parents' relationship, how has that impacted your decision?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I will say too, I'm gonna go backtrack to the 20-somethings and then go back. I think it's really important, even if right now it's because, she's busy. I think that's something that really needs to be normalized, is that a woman can find out what God has her doing before she goes forward, because I have had former students. I was a high school teacher. So my oldest former student is 28, and I have talked to them through several relationships. Some of them got married like right after, and I believe that can work. But for a majority of them, mid-20s come along and they're like, oh my gosh, I made a mistake. You know who I was. And it doesn't even mean that that person that they're with is this bad guy. Just they had no time to learn themselves. And so that's just important, like you said, either way, because a lot of my friends who got married really early, they've been now married 20 years, 16 years. And now they're like, oh, wait, I didn't think about X, Y, and Z. And at that point, you have a family, you have kids. So you're in a hard place. So just want to kind of say that. But yeah, my past experiences. So I will say, growing up, no one in my immediate family was married. And I'm also Caribbean. So this is, for the better or worse, just when you grow up in an immigration house, like, it's really normal for us to have one parent in the other country sometimes, or, that's just like, a lot of my friends had that. That wasn't seen as like, oh my gosh, you're missing something.
Yeah, you're in a broken home.
Exactly. It's just like, no, they're there. We send them things. We see them every now and then. So I think there must have been a point where I was like, oh, you can be okay. And my mom, one thing I always say, that she was really masterful, even though my dad was in another country, she never said to me, oh, look at your dad, he's nothing. She's never done that. Like, I was sending him Christmas cards. I was sending him all these things. And my dad had some substance abuse issues, but he was never talked about poorly. Even when I met him in person when I got older, it was like, hey dad, I love you. And I was prepared for like some of his substance abuse things to like still be a part of him, but I was never taught. Because I think some people, especially I know you all had a past show where you had some male critiques of the show. And I know some people's first thing is like, oh, daddy issues and mom issues. That's I got it. I got it. But I grew up with my dad's brother. So there was nothing that made me say I hate him. Like it was real. I used to watch those talk shows where people would reunite with their dad, or they'll be so angry. And I truly didn't get it. And I'm not trying to make it seem like my life was just idyllic and I had no issues, because nothing is perfect. But my mom just did a great job of framing.
Yes, that was the key. Mama did a great job and not planting the seeds of hating you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, she told me things about he was a great bass guitar player. So I end up loving the bass guitar. So it's like there was this connection that was there. Now, granted, the best situation would have been to be one in the home. Like, I'm not going to pretend like, oh, this worked for me. That would have been the best situation, but it didn't. I don't have that like seed of men are this, So when I was in my 20s, I dated a guy off and on for like 4 years, and he was a decent guy, but I will say, like, faith-wise, that was always the kicker. It's like, you do believe, but that daily practice, that daily devotional practice, and we were off and on for 4 years. So it's just like, if we take the next step and get married, like, I can't say that that's solid, And sometimes you can have especially as believers, you can have a lot of the other things. I was attracted. I thought he was really handsome. He really cared about saving his money and all that stuff. But the faith aspect has to be.
That's the foundation.
And I think one thing that's really difficult about even dating as a Christian is that the rubber does meet the road there. And I think, a lot of Christians, and I've seen, I'm sure you all have too, they get to a point of desperation sometimes where it's like, I know his faith's a little off, but he will go to church with me. He is kind of a believer, I have a youth right now. I'm not going to say too much so I don't put their business out there, but I have a youth on my group right now who's dating, and they're dating someone who spiritually is not necessarily the most present. And I keep saying to them, how are things? And they're like, it's good. And I said, but have you all been able to talk about spiritual things? You said that's what you wanted. Not really, not yet. And I'm trying to let this young person know that matters. I'm not saying that matters. Young man is horrible. I'm not saying that he needs to be thrown away. But in your life as a growing Christian, as a young person, it's okay for you to not be in that and learn God and learn yourself.
Yes.
So I think that is mainly like any other stories that I have. I think I dated also like in my mid-20s. Like they're few and far in between, but that always was what was the rubber that met the road, right? That was the thing. Like spiritually, there is a semblance of God. And trust me, there were definitely times where I was tempted to be like, oh, let me just sweep that under the rug. I had so many friends who did that. And like, they're suffering 10, 15 years afterwards. And I was like, I may have the lizard loose in my house and be like, oh my gosh, I need a husband. But when the lizard is gone, I have peace. Having the peace in my own home is more important to me than being with anybody. Truthfully.
Oh yeah. Big time. And we talked about that too, like you said, going into it and you try to rationalize it. But that's the foundation. If we're not in agreement on that, we're unequally yoked on that, it's going to just ripple into so many other areas of your life. And like you said, you get down the road 10, 15 years, now you have your children. And we talked about this, Lorraine, we're talking about your list. Now you have your children where he's saying, my kid's going on Saturday. And you're like, well, they going with me on Sunday. And you have this struggle and this tug of war that, hey, had early in the dating, you made this thing, you're non-negotiable. Like, okay, you yourself heartache and years of this fight, because it's just gonna, and unfortunately, that's a battle that won't ever end. It's a spirit.
It won't ever end.
And I hate to say this because I don't revel in my friends' misfortune, but unfortunately, some of my friends are the cautionary tale for me. Like some of these things I'm referencing, like they're real. I can see their names in the people, right? And like if these are people that I grew up with, I remember one particular person, there was a red flag right before they got married. Like they were something popped up in their phone, like they weren't even lurking. And it was big. But I had already been with the person for a decade. So they were like, I don't know. They ended up getting married and only finding out more things down the road, And so I wish I could say that's the only story, but I know so many.
It's never the only story.
Exactly. And so that's a cautionary tale for me. So to your question of the past, my relationships definitely influenced it, but honestly, just I don't have to touch the stove. Like I can feel
it's hot.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what is your actual position? So let's be clear for the audience.
Yes.
What is your position or perspective on or desire for a relationship or marriage right now?
That's a great question. I want to answer it honestly, but in a way, like you said, that's clear. That's why I'm thinking a little bit. I would say most days I am very concerned with, so some background. I was a teacher for almost 10 years. Teaching was, anybody who was an educator would understand. I'm not using this word lightly. Teaching was traumatic for me. I've said this publicly many times. Like it was traumatic, hearing student trauma, working 60, 70 hours a week. It was just a lot. So the last 3 or so years of my life have been, what are my routines? Like I literally every week write down my routines. What's my new rhythm? All this stuff, right? And so right now I have been, and this is so cliche, but it's true. I've been so focused on creating my life and designing what it looks like that on most days, I'm not thinking even about someone else because I'm trying to manage my own, right? As far as the desire, I'm open. So that is, I am open. But with my openness, because I have, by God's grace, I've curated such peace with my routines and all of those things. It took me a long time to figure out, all right, how do you on Sunday not just sleep all day, right? Like how do you have productive rest? Like, how do you feel energized? Like, it has taken me years to finally cultivate that. So I'm open, but I'm not jumping to everything. Like if I could see from the beginning that there's no seriousness here, you don't have a relationship with God, we are completely different, I don't want to waste your time or waste mine. So the position is open, but I actually, and this, my friends are always like, oh, don't say that, Nicole. I'm like, I said something detrimental, but open, but very aware that most likely I will be single for the rest of my life. So, but open. And I am like so serious. I have already started to like watch plans about growing older alone. How do you get your money together? How do you build a community of like elderly people? Like start connecting, like telling your tribe now, hey, can we have a living arrangement? Or your child is thinking, I have friends who, not that their children have any responsibility for me, but I have friends whose children call me auntie. I'm an only child as well. So I have to think about like, some people are negative. It's like, no, I'm 38 and I will be 65 tomorrow. Like think about this, So yeah, open, but knowing that it may not happen.
So I love that. And I want to go back to the conversation. I started to say this and then I got off track. The reason that we even decided to have this program was just because of a conversation that we were having together just as friends. And the thing that I thought was so interesting and really, really important was you started to talk about it a little bit, just about curating your piece, but you like, when I think about having to think about someone else and all that goes in, even in a good way. And all that goes into that just is not appealing to me. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's daunting to me.
The part about it. To me, it's like you weren't even talking about just the regular challenges that obviously go into a relationship. You were just like, even the good stuff. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I'm laughing because I remember I was dating somebody in my mid-20s, I think, and it was going well. So this is the time where it was like really good before I could see any red flags, right? And I remember sitting in my house, I kid you not, I was sitting in silence as I usually do, looking at my bookshelf. And I said, I really like this guy. And I said, wait, if we got together, he'd be here on the couch next to me. But I'm quiet right now. Like, you'd have to I'd have to talk to you. Like, that's crazy. And I was having like sweats and my heart was beating because I was like, oh my gosh, this is going good. I need to, we need money. I need a like I need your wing and my wing. And I think that is one of the things that I recognize, like even in a good situation, knowing that I genuinely, me personally, heal in solitude, and not even romantic relationships. That has actually affected me before in my regular sisterhoods, where we have really clear conversation. Nicole, I need you to show up, or you're right, I'm so sorry. Or I will show up, but I need time to decompress. And I think when people think about introversion, especially with the internet, they think it's just a personality test, but it's a nervous system setting. And it's really, I can really feel like my chest cave in when I've had too much around me. And so when it comes to a relationship and the fact that it's that kind of 24/7 kind of there, that is a struggle for me. And it's not that it can't be overcome. I'm not the only introvert in the world. Introverts are married. So something that I'm really honest about, I have someone that I know who's in a great marriage, absolutely phenomenal marriage, but they're at a crossroads because the family always wants to be around and they don't always want that. Not that they don't love the family, but they want time to cultivate their own family, right? And that's a good relationship. And I have seen that issue be so hard for them. And that's another thing too. Like, I know when you're marrying that person, but you're marrying their ecosystem, their family, that. And being an only child with an international family where I actually don't have to see some of my family members, I have a WhatsApp relationship with a lot of my family because they're in England or Japan or whatever. So part of that, somebody could say this and say, oh, you see, it's because of her upbringing. And they'd be right. Like, I'm not afraid of that critique, but I have lived a life of being able to cultivate great relationships, not necessarily in the same space. So and again, I have to sometimes work on that because other people love differently. So I'm not saying it's just all good, but I think being single too, it's like, it's easier to explain that. Like, it's not personal. This is just how I rest and recharge.
Right. And it's a lot easier with your friends than it is with someone who's living with you 24/7, 365 for the rest of your born days.
Well, I was just saying, I did one of the therapists on Married at First Sight is one of my guilty pleasures to watch. Dr. Pepper, she and her husband live in separate houses.
Wow.
And I think this is part of her thing, that way she needs to rest and recharge because she's a therapist, relationship therapist. But she's like, no, we're together almost every day. But when it's bedtime, I'm over here, he's over there.
I mean, you can't just go to separate rooms.
Yeah, I was thinking, okay, a separate room maybe, but separate houses. Well, I think they got to, when they initially got married, I guess they were already in their spaces.
Yes.
And they said together almost every day.
Wow.
And I was just like, wow.
So I will say this, my friends send me those memes and things all the time because I know that is wild to everybody. And especially in Christendom, there's, you want to be protected. But I'm like, yo, that works for me. I get married tomorrow. Like, as long as you're available when the lizard is out, you are good.
You got to live close, though.
You have to live close.
The lizard.
Lizards,
they move fast and they will hide. So I need you to live close. But okay, well, I love that. So now I want to talk, just get deeper into, like, for you, what are some of the benefits that you experienced because of your position?
Yeah.
And I'm just going to give you all the questions. What are some of the challenges you face? Then I want to talk about the resistance that you get from other people when you share this perspective.
Absolutely. So one of the benefits, I actually saw a post the other day, and I don't remember everything they said about the benefits, but it made me really happy because people don't post that often, because you seem, selfish and like you're showing off. And me saying the benefits doesn't mean that someone who's married doesn't have great benefits either. I mean,
of course not.
They have a lizard catcher, but this is the running joke for the night. But it's true.
I love it.
Okay. But I think one of the benefits is room for introspection. I get a lot of times just and process, and I think when you're married, you can still have that room, but then I have to communicate about, hey, babe, I need time to think and process, right? Rather than I'm just thinking and processing. So I have a lot of time. Sometimes it really does feel like a charmed life, even though I'm not rich. I'm like, I can go on my porch and journal. Like sometimes I'm literally just sitting in my house and looking around, and I'm so thrilled to have a candle on or a diffuser, and that my time can be just thinking about my inner world. That's really important to me. Also too, I don't want children. I've never wanted kids. And so that is something I really appreciate. Though I truly believe what the word says about children being a blessing, I really appreciate that, like, I'm in tune to what I need at all times. If I'm spiritually off, I can go to God. I don't necessarily have to worry about the spiritual life of so many people when I'm trying to keep myself together in the Lord.
That's significant.
Or even ministry, like Paul talks about this. I have more time for certain ministry opportunities. So like I work with the teens at church, and throughout the week, I have to create the lessons. I have to print things out. I have to come up with the activities, plan field trips, all of that stuff. I could not do that if I had a family. Like I probably could, but I would have been so strained to do that.
And so exhausted, like so many women are. Like it's just real. All of the things that you're saying, not to cut you off, but all the things that you're saying are things that women in our community, praying sisters, are trying. They come there for that kind of relief for those couple of hours on a Sunday. But they're feeling overwhelmed. Not that they're unhappy. I mean, whatever. There are varying levels of that. But like, not that they don't want to be married, but that marriage is a responsibility. It's a huge responsibility, particularly for women. Men have their own responsibilities. No one's denying that. But then the children become mostly the woman's responsibility too. And even, this new term that is true that we just never knew what to call it, but that invisible labor of having to remember everybody's everything, all the appointments and all of the this and all of the birthdays, all of the social security numbers and all of the this and all of that and all the PTA and all of that. And it's just like, where's my time for introspection? I don't know a lot of wives who are getting a whole lot of introspection time. Talk to me, Onita.
I was like, do you want me to break down right now? Good Lord. It ain't enough hours in the day. It's not enough hours in the day, honestly, because we are doing all the things concerned about everybody's well-being and their mental health. If they've had time to, rebuild and making a safe space for them at home. So you do have to think about everybody's everything, all the things. Absolutely. And then you're trying to work and do ministry. It's a lot.
And the thing that I love about you, Nicole, is that you thought about these things and you're honest about these things.
Yes.
I think there are a lot of women who may not say they didn't ever want to be married, but who thought about these things, but then were like, well, but this is kind of what you do. And to say you don't want to be married is kind of weird. And like part of me does, but part of me doesn't, part of me is okay, just kind of doing my own thing. And so it's like really important for us to bring this out, that you're honest about I don't want this and I'm okay not wanting it. And it doesn't matter that you think that I should want it.
That's the part. I'm a recovering, you don't know this, Onita, but I'm a recovering people pleaser. That's what I say. So that has been in all areas of my life. And I'm sorry that you feel away, because I don't know what to tell you.
Yes.
I'm not telling you not to be married. I support you. I buy you the present at your wedding. I talk to you at night if you cry. I'm hugging you. I'm praying for you. But then you're mad at me. And it was just like, I never discouraged you from being married. I supported marriage. I believe
Yes.
in the marriage. But then if I say I don't want this, no, Nicole, like you sound like me. But you're telling me I sound like you when you were 20 years old. I am not 20 anymore. Like I'm sure in what
Yeah.
I do. So
Right.
And I appreciate so much that you've clearly given thought to this, and not superficial things. You've really have thought this out. You've given great examples for those who are either single right now and searching or unsure,
yeah.
and for those who may be married and or possibly getting divorced, especially older women, because I've seen it a lot during the pandemic, and I'm talking about just even in church,
Yep.
who are like, what can my life even be like now? Who maybe bought into the lies that I can't be fulfilled or happy now that I'm alone. That you've given them some real steps, really, and tools of things to think about and to consider, especially the stuff about the village and thinking about ways to plan out, what's going to happen if I am, it is just me, or I'm leaving a marriage and we didn't have kids. What does that look like? To also put fire under their butts too, to say, you ain't got time to sit here and sulk. You do have a village.
Legit.
Like, you let them call you auntie and Nana, whoever you are. Like, these are your people. And even now, as I'm helping my grandparents, my grandparents have a lot of people, and we're like, where are these people? Where are they? Like, where are they? Have they been? But I know for a fact there was never a lot of time thought put into nurturing those relationships with the village. It was strictly about her and her man. The same way that I was raised in a home, and mom's like, oh, have your man that can provide. That was it. So for a lot of them, it was them and their man. And they were good. That's all that matters. But what happens? You're now by yourself, and that's been the only relationship you've nurtured.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry.
That's true.
Oh, no, it's done. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other part of that is, even if you want to be married, it don't mean you're gonna be. So, so you still need to be planning and thinking. And even if you are, it doesn't mean that person's not going to die before you or you die before them. Like, there's still most likely going to be a period of time when you're single again, when you're not married again, when you don't have a partner again. And so all of the things that you're saying are just important in life. So whatever your marital status is, that it's probably going to come up at some point.
Yeah,
absolutely. Okay. And I think too, with that, it's just important for women to be able to be encouraged to walk in their gifts, because at that point you're able to save resources that's your own. And it's not that you're planning for divorce or hoping for divorce. You can still have faith that God will keep it a lasting marriage or relationship. But if anything happens beyond your control, you have that, and one more benefit too is talking about resources is that I'm able to give a little bit more. So like if somebody is in trouble or in need, I will know a married couple that would love to help, but they got 4 children. So they can't. But I can give an extra, not because I'm rich, but because I was just going to spend it on eating out anyway. So someone is like, I have problems where I need my rent due. Like, by God's grace, I've been able to give people a larger sum because it's not like I'm taking a large risk. I'm gonna be short, but I'm not taking food out of my kids' mouths.
Yeah. No, that's good. Okay, so talk about some of the challenges that you face.
Yeah. So, sorry. You already know what came to my head. Some of the challenges.
The lizard in
my house. I promise everyone my house is clean, but I had this window. It's a long story.
Every time we go to Florida, a lizard gets in and we all are freaking out. Okay. What it is.
So yes, number 1 challenge out of the way. Second challenge. I think one thing that I'm going to get to the pushback. But my friend was saying this, and I was like, actually, in spite of my position, I agree with her. When you're in a relationship, you have someone who's dedicated to kind of your every life's issue. So even if you have good friends that you can contact late, 12, 11 and 12 or night, they may be like, oh, I feel so bad, I'm praying. But if they have their own life going on, a dedicated partner is, man, this issue is going on for months. They may not get, sometimes they get tired of it too, right? But they may not get as tired because they want to see you well. Whereas your friends may be like, even the ones that are great friends, we're talking about this again, you know, or I have another friend with another issue, so I can't give you this much energy. So
Right.
I think that's one of the things they talk about when it comes to partnership, having like a witness to your life. And again, the village can be that too, but that immediate person, I'm coming home, my gosh, my boss drove me crazy, I can't wait to tell my husband, and he gives guidance. That sort of thing is just not there, no matter if you want it or not. That's the reality, right?
It's
You don't have that witness to your life, you know, to kind of
totally agree.
Yeah, to see how far you've come, and you know what I mean. And so I think that's just that's a reality, regardless.
And that's a reality for the good stuff and the bad stuff.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? And I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's the question that when I'm asked, what's the hardest part about being single? Like, everything is on you.
Yeah.
You know, everything's on you, and there's no one that has the same level of buy-in. Even your best friends don't have the same level of buy-in to the good or the bad. You know, when you're married, like, it's our problem, it's our victory, it's not just yours.
Absolutely.
You know? So
absolutely. Yeah, no. So that's and I wanted to kind of say those realities because I didn't want to paint a false picture as like, oh, I'm good, so I never think about these things, you know? And then shared resources too. Like, this sounds really silly, but it's my truth. It wasn't until about 2 years ago when my rent went up, like, I want to say 400 or 600, something crazy in a year. And I said, oh, if there were two incomes, it wouldn't be as bad of a blow. Like, it really never hit me till my rent went up. And I said, well, what am I going to do? And I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. And again, it's not even just about that person can give you money, but like you said, like, we're sharing this life. That wouldn't have just been my burden of, oh my gosh, what do I do? It would be like, I love you, so we're going to work this out, you know? And so those sort of changes in life, like, you are kind of on your own. I would say another challenge is the pushback, right? So especially as a believer in Christ, like, God does say that about that marriage mimics, you know, the kingdom, like our relationship with God. Children are a blessing. No one's discounting that. But as I think that I said to Lorraine, sometimes churches can give you the youth group treatment. Like, you are 50 and 60 years old and you have a 10-minute conversation with a guy in the church. Oh my gosh, you all were talking. I am 60 years old. He's a friend. Like, get out of my mind, get out of my space, you know? It's just this weirdness that exists. And it's just like, I can exist without every interaction. I was at church one time and we were eating together and I met this lady for the first time. And I know she meant well, whatever. But the first time, she only spoke to me for 10 minutes and she whispered to the lady next to her and said, I have somebody for her. You don't know my walk. You don't know how I'm living. I don't know that person. Like, that's dangerous. It's not wise even. And so the challenge is everybody seeing you with a deficit.
Yes.
So from the beginning, they'll ask you no questions.
Wow.
But they'll meet you for the first time, know nothing about your life. Do you want to be with this person? And that is not the first time that's happened to me. At another church, there was this older guy who met a guy in Starbucks the day before. And this was a predominantly non-Black church. So the guy was Black in Starbucks. So I guess he thought, you know, and I was like, there's so many guys here that you have seen grow up since birth. Why didn't you introduce me to them? Right. He was like pushing, like, you should talk to them. And I finally had to say, like, this is dangerous. Like, I never even told you I wanted to be with anybody. And it's imposing. Like, if somebody has a real relationship with you and they know you and they're like, Nicole, I know that you're not really looking right now, but there is this guy, and just based on your character and how long I've known him for 4 years, and I've known you know, let's just meet him. I think it'd be great. That's different. I'm getting the free dinner. I'm getting the free dinner. But I will be open to having a conversation rather than, oh, you have a deficit and I have to fill it. And that's asking me what God has done in my life, what I'm reading lately. I'm not a whole person to you.
That's so good. That is so good.
Yes.
I did a sermon at a church for their singles day. This was several years ago, and probably 2018. And I decided before I started, I did a little PowerPoint, and I said 10 things never to say to your single friends, your single members. And one of them was, why aren't you married yet? Or something like that. So it's like, that's such a ridiculous question to, and I made it funny or whatever. And it was a large, but, and then I said, 10 things you can say to your single friends.
Oh, I like that.
But I think that's so what you said is really almost the essence of what I try to fight against in church, particularly in faith communities, this idea that to be unmarried is to be in the negative, that it is a deficit. And I just can't seem to understand why that's the perspective that we carry when, number one, Jesus, I don't recall him being married. Paul, the second greatest evangelist ever that lived, was not married. There were plenty of people in the Bible who were not married. And then the reality that if that was God's plan for me, and if it was actually wrong, would he not then have filled that quote unquote deficit or that gap long before now?
Yeah. So
I really love that you said that.
Yeah.
What other kind of resistance do you get from people?
Yeah. Anita, did you have something to say?
Oh no, girl! I'm just sitting there simmering. I'm just like, I was just saying though, just the fact that you guys have already touched on it though, but that unfortunately marriage has been weaponized in church,
And idolized.
Yeah, and to where even to the point some people have been pushed and rushed into marriage in church just because they were dating, and people kept saying, "All right, now go ahead and do it," and then they later very miserable, unhappy, and some eventually divorced. Yes. And then leave the church because of that. And so we got to do better, people. We got to do better for church folks with not doing that, and also making people feel less than. I can also say my mom, remember being a single mom in church, and it still happens. Unfortunately, we didn't get the invites to certain potlucks or certain events, and it still happens. It still happens.
You just gonna start speaking all kind of truths now.
Where you're still not, you don't even get all the
single men do though. Single men get all the invitations, but single women, no.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know if people feel like you walk around with a scarlet letter. Yes. Like, what is
trying to take their man?
And I will tell you, I've been in a couple of women's nights where you've had one or two women going, "Girl, you having a single woman of your house? I wouldn't have none of them of my house." And I'm like, what do you mean? I was once single, so now
yes.
So now I can't trust my single friends over my house because some people, unfortunately, really got this thing in their mind. And so
so true.
It still happens today, and it just needs to stop, y'all.
No, that is true. That point, I wasn't even going to bring that up, but that is definitely something I have faced. Now, I do believe in your marriage, you got to protect it. There are people, men and women, that are trifling, that are trying to take and steal and get that. But like, God also gives you wisdom, discernment, you know, and what you will find is that a single person, man or woman, that actually really loves God and respects you will basically put those boundaries out before you even have to. Right. They'll be like, all right, I'm going to go now, or, whatever. Yes. So a lot of times you don't even have to fully worry about it. And if something is off, like, trust that that your husband or your wife or the Lord will reveal it. So that's definitely something I've gotten before. Like, because I'm an only child and my dad was in another country, some people, they have their response to it is like, I'm, promiscuity and stuff like that. The way it manifested towards me, and I thank God for this, is that I just collect a lot of brothers and like eventually I become friends with their wives. I feel like that was the way I filled the void, was that I have just so many like brothers. And I'm talking about people I now know for like 20 years. Mm-hmm. So it's just a beautiful relationship. And if their wives were like, oh, who is she? I would have lost some family. Like these people become my family. Mm-hmm. And as a single person, like, you are the one in the church, like the odd person out. And so I have family because these husbands and wives, like I have a friend, I've known him since 2010. And that's actually when he got married. And I knew him more than I knew his wife because we used to perform together in a poetry troupe. So we were doing books of the Bible, like an acting thing, and it was Song of Solomon. And I was performing a poem with him. But I remember saying to him, can you please ask your wife if she's okay with us performing?
Yes.
And then she said yes. And then we performed it. But after every show, he would bring her up at the end and say, everybody got to thank my wife for supporting this, you know? And years later, me and her casually talked about like our friendship and stuff. And she was just like, she was like, I stopped. She's like, not that she ever worried about me, but she was like, I never worried about you because you were the one who said, ask your wife if this is okay, you know? And it was a performance that was happening in church, but it was still intimate because it was Song of Solomon, right? We didn't have a kissing scene or anything, but what we were saying, you know? And that has been one of the ways that trust has been built. Like there's been times where I've been on the phone with him, like burst video, his kids are home and she walks in and I'm like, hey girl, she's like, hey, because there's an open communication. Like she knows it's not happening at, 12 p.m. or any of that kind of thing. So I think that's one of the things, like being seen as like the potential Jezebel. And you're like, I just want community. Like
exactly. And I think it's important to have, friends of different men and women. I realized that I love my friends very much, but a few months ago I wanted to see a therapist, and I asked specifically for a man because I'm just like, all I have are women that speak into me. Like I don't have any men. I ended up having to choose a different guy from the one that I originally got, but and he was able to share some insights with me that I come from a male perspective. I have brothers, but they don't live here. And so, when we're together, we're, great, but we don't like talk on the phone and stuff like that too much. So I just think it's important. And, it makes me very sad when, I guess I've just kind of accepted that this is just the way that it is, but that we have a church. And you would think, okay, it's just a specific local church. But I've been to many churches. And it's the same. And it's like single men get invited all the time and single women don't. They get invited by other single women. But it's just like, at that same church that I was talking about, I did the PowerPoint. My sermon was, where do I fit? And the concept was that we do, like you were saying, we don't have more time, but we have more flexibility to serve in ministry and those types of things. And so we should be doing that. We shouldn't be sitting on the sidelines whining about not being married. But by the same token, I said, but the church has a responsibility. We're part of the body too. Like, what about holidays? What about Christmas? What about Thanksgiving? Are you going somewhere? Do you have someplace? Like I said, we should be the aunties and uncles and mentors to your children that help. Obviously you want to vet people or whatever, but you should do that anyway. But I said, that's how we fit into, we should be part of your family, where like people are going out on Sunday to have family day, but like I'm by myself at home because I don't have a family. And it's like, okay, so maybe I don't go with you every week, but can I go sometimes? Can I and even in preaching that message, and I ended up preaching it at my home church too. I said, I've literally been in this church 10 years at that time, probably about 10 years. And I said, I've probably been to 5 people's homes total. And people are like, oh. And then nobody invited me over even after the sermon.
Mercy.
It's just so I'm like, so there are challenges for sure.
And the thing is, like, there's opportunities there because you have the overwhelmed families. If you have the aunties, you can go on date night.
Exactly.
I'm discipling your kids. It's a win-win. My rent goes up. I can have dinner at your house, but I'm also babysitting your children. Like, that's the communal way that we can have.
It's
a win-win, but and we And it's like when you really want to have effective ministry for singles, it's always singles who have to lead that ministry.
Yeah.
I've had, one pastor, he wasn't the pastor at my church, but he was a pastor in Richmond, and he had been divorced.
Right.
And so he now had a different perspective of singleness. He was remarried at the time, but then he started like doing actual singles ministry, like great stuff. But he said, he was open. He said he got married when he was in his 20s. Yeah. And so he said when people would ask him about singles ministry, he didn't have anything for them. Mm-hmm. But then when when his wife left and all of that, then he had to actually walk that out. And it was like, okay, so there really isn't anything for single people or divorced people or, people who've lost a spouse, or any of that for in this church. So then he started something, and, but him and Pastor Leggett are the only two pastors in my history of being in church from the womb, like that actually have had, real identifiable, effective ministry for single people.
Yeah. That's the key word, the effective part, because there are churches that have it. And I'm like, what is this corny? Like, this is awkward. Like,
trying to have a just random movie night of a bunch of different age group singles. We're going to have popcorn and we're going to watch Fireproof. And I'm like,
no.
What are you doing for the singles? What? Like,
right. Hope you meet each other. Oh my gosh.
Right. It's crazy. It's crazy.
And movie night's fine if that's not all that you do.
If that's not
right. Have some social stuff, but have some seminars, have some all of these other things that are important. Okay, so as we start to kind of wind down here, I want to get some advice from you. What advice would you give to others who may feel like you feel, but they're getting that kind of pushback or resistance, or people are saying, no, you don't really think that, you really like the woman in the video, like that whole thing, like deep down they really do want a man and they're just lying and all of that.
Right. So one of the things I think is you can be honest about all the parts and not be ashamed. You don't have to try to say, I'm keeping this persona. So when you said, what is one of the difficulties? I'm like, well, you don't have a witness to your life, right? And that you can be honest about that without conceding to, okay, it's true. Deep down, I'm, like you can just be honest about what you wish sometimes, but here's how you are. So be honest and not be ashamed. And then not allow yourself to be gaslit by people that are just going by tradition versus wisdom. So there's trying to be careful. There are people that I know currently who say to me often, I say, oh, I don't want children. And I'm very strong about it, serious about it. And I also try to be very sensitive. I'm not putting that on a t-shirt because I have friends who actually want children and can't have it for one reason or the other. So I still got to be sensitive. But if somebody is engaging me and I say, I don't want it, no, you sound like me and you do and da-da-da, and you can still have them. I didn't say I didn't think I could have them. I didn't say I was afraid I could have them. I said, I don't want them. And so a lot of times I will double down, but if it gets to the point where I'm wasting my energy, then I'll stop. So I will just say firmly, and some people may see this as combative, but you're being combative towards me. So I'm not saying to be combative. I'm like, look, I said firmly, I don't want children. I think it's great that you have children, but that is not something I have ever wanted. And I'm going to kind of end the conversation here. And that's not who I used to be, because I was a major people pleaser, but it just brought me so much distress to have to kind of dance and maybe you're right, maybe one day. No, it's true. It's not true. Or like if people are like, why are you single and da-da-da, like I told my great grandmother, rest in peace, I love my great grandmother. One time she was like, you're not going to get married? And I said, Mama, I can't just go in the street and grab a man. Like that's not how it works. So, and she was like, oh yeah, that's true. So I think too, is just realizing that the landscape that we're in, like when you say to single people, oh, just find someone, it's not the dating of your youth. Like you found your man in 1945. I'm sorry to tell you, it's not how it used to be. A lot of men in church are passive and doing it to be polite, to not be sinful. But like I was telling Lorraine, I don't care if you buy me flowers every day and call me, I'm like, oh, he's so nice. Unless you tell me directly, like, hey, I want to get to know more, I don't see nothing.
No.
No.
They're trying to be courted. You're like, no, you court me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And especially at my big age, like you just have to just say what it is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think too, like the advice is be honest, double down, and you can still be godly when you're doing it.
Yeah.
This is about boundaries too. Double down. Decide. Number 3, decide when it's just not worth your energy, and you're like, I hear you, I disagree. Can you move on to another subject? And then 4, like, be honest about, hey, I don't see anything I like, or the men here are passive. Like that's something I also say too. People who think like you're just closed. Never said I was closed, but I do have the standard.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. And no one here is meeting that standard currently.
Exactly.
So no, I love that. Oh, Nita, did you have any other questions before I know we gotta go.
I honestly, that was actually my last question too, was just advice on for other people who may be in your same boat or season that you're in right now, because life changes, things change.
Absolutely.
And like you said, you didn't say I've sworn off men, I'm done with them, they're dead to me.
Yeah.
Just like where I am right now, I'm fulfilled in my singleness.
Exactly.
I know who I am. I've spent time literally asking myself the questions that you should ask, and I've been self-reflecting and I'm journaling. I also know too how I am when I have a bad day. So if he does come, I can actually clearly say to my spouse, when I'm having a bad day, I'm gonna need to go to my certain room.
Exactly.
Please don't ask me 10 times what's
From
wrong.
my house.
Exactly.
Yeah, in my house, in the same house. Because I know me, babe. I need to.
Yeah.
This is how I process.
Yeah.
This is how I rebuild. This. You spent the time learning you. I think it's so critical that you spent the time learning you, knowing yourself, and dating yourself, taking yourself out, but also looking at the things that really make you who you are, so that even if that person is to come, you are able to clearly communicate, this is who I am.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
You spent the time breaking down the people pleaser, because when you're with the person, a lot of that, there's compromise, and then unfortunately sometimes there's people pleasing because you're not really sure who you are and your values, and you become a chameleon. You fall into, well, this is what he likes, so if you don't know yourself. And so even without the just laying out different steps, you've given us so many tips that people can use and how to navigate in their life and their singleness, so that they can be happy single, be fulfilled, but also walk in their singleness hand in hand with God.
Yeah.
Knowing that he still loves you, knowing that you're valued, knowing that you have worth, that you can still have love with your friends, with your nieces and nephews that inherited your village. You can do all the things and still be happy, and that forget what society may say about it, but that you can be a happy single Christian, being fulfilled, learning yourself, but also open to that. If God says it's time, Nicole, here he is,
right?
And he's not passive,
and he can catch lizards.
Right, he can catch the lizards.
He's not afraid too. Yeah,
right. He loves God, and he's going to pursue you by seeking God for you. Then you're like, okay, you'll be ready for that time. So I just think this is great. I don't know where you were, 28 years ago when I was before I got.
Love it. I love it.
But I could clearly say to any single woman out there listening, single man, these things go both ways. And so, listen to this episode again, take notes, share it, like, subscribe.
Like
also TikTok it's so many good jewels in here, Nicole.
Well, what's interesting is, and we do have to go, but I don't think it goes both ways, because people don't question men about this.
Oh yeah, that part, no.
People don't have the same attitude toward men like they do to women who say they want to be single, and men don't get the same resistance. Men can just do whatever. And then people are like, okay, no one's sweating them for the most part.
Yeah. But I guess it can go both ways in like how they feel internally, but not in the pressure for sure. Yeah. But thank you all so much. Oh, go ahead.
When you have to deal with your own stuff, and then you got to try to manage other people's stuff about your stuff, then that's just a double whammy.
No, that is true. That is very, very true. Because you're spending a lot of time trying to prove. And I think that's another piece of advice, that you don't have to prove anything.
You don't have to prove
except for
anything.
the
Yes.
Lord.
You
And-
just have to live your life.
Yeah. So you also can choose to just say, hey, I don't usually talk about this part of my life, and just save it for your tribe.
Yes.
It might be a good idea to have a single guy on here who is maybe it doesn't want to, or is in the same mindset.
Yes.
Like he's not pressed about this.
Yeah.
So I want to read this scripture, Philippians 4:11-13. Not that I speak in regard to need, for I've learned in whatever state I am to be content.
Yes.
I know how to be abased and I know how to abound. Everywhere in all things, I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. And this one we're familiar. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
Yes.
But I want to just take a second to say what contentment actually means, because a lot of times we think contentment is just like, oh, I've just accepted that, you know, this is my life or whatever. Paul is saying that contentment is, and the dictionary says, in a state of peaceful happiness.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And he's saying that in all of those situations, he was in a state of peaceful happiness.
Yeah.
And so there are a whole lot of married people who would love to be in a state of peaceful happiness right now, and single people too.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's the lesson, you know, besides all the wonderful things that you've shared with us, that we want to make sure that people know, first of all, if you aren't content as a single, you will be less so as a married person.
Preach.
You'll have the little blip on the when the wedding happens, and maybe if you know, I mean, I've heard people who the day after things just started going down, but you might have a little blip for the first 6 months or year, but you're going to go back to the state that you were in and actually worse. Research shows that, particularly women, because now different responsibilities are added to all the other stuff. I always say, if you're not happy if you don't love your life when you're single, you'll hate it when you get married. And so I think that learning to be in a state of peaceful happiness, whatever, wherever, however, is so important. And the Bible tells us that we are able to do that.
Yes.
Nicole, I just want to thank you so much. This was as great as I thought it would be.
Thank you all for having me.
Yes.
Love having you, and maybe we'll have you back to talk about some other single stuff going on. But we are grateful for the lessons that you've shared, and just your experience, and just being open and funny and not lizard catchers. Where are you?
Yes.
The next episode, I'd be like, you know what? I said I was happy, but this man showed me all the lizards he caught, and now we're inseparable.
You got to have a real faith relationship with God, and you got to be able to catch lizards.
Yes.
Then we can have a conversation about what happens next.
It's me.
Maybe be willing to live in separate houses. So we thank you all for watching. We appreciate all of you and the comments and everything like that. And we love you. Please like, share, comment. Just want to mention Praying Sisters, because when she talked about community, this is really this is what we have there. It's not just single women, it's not just married, it's a mix, but it's a community of women who are part of the village. They are the village. And so you can, in the chat, the comments would be there, I believe. You can click on that link and find out more about that. And so with that, until next time, make choices that will help you live, love, and marry wiser. God bless.